On the 16th of February 1936, school teachers Bella and Michael Icahn welcomed a baby boy. Their little boy grew up to become the most formidable trader on Wall Street. After graduating from Princeton University, Carl Icahn spent 2 years in the military before he began his career as a stockbroker in 1961. Icahn, a working-class kid from Queens, became the undisputed titan of corporate raiders. Before we dive in, it's worth mentioning that this story covers a snapshot of Icahn's most controversial leverage buyouts in his quest for maximum profit. The mid-1980s was a world of yuppies, big hair, shoulder pads and excess, and while Wall Street had its fair share of colourful characters, there is one man who brought fear and admiration in equal measure. Mixed in among the excess of money and power was the biggest Molotov cocktail of them all, the leveraged buyout. The leveraged buyout enjoyed its moment in the sun during the 1980s. The three biggest players in the leveraged buyout business were Icahn, T. Boone Pickens, and Irvin Jacobs. So what is a leveraged buyout? A leveraged buyout involves a company borrowing huge sums of cash so that it can acquire another company. However, in order to offset their risk, the company that is being purchased needs to have valuable assets that can be exchanged for money. This is why, when Icahn targeted businesses to acquire, he looked for these key factors. First, the business needed to be undervalued so that Icahn could buy its shares at a lower than market price. Second, the business had to own assets that could be exchanged for cash. Icahn knew that once he gained significant ownership of a business, he was then in a powerful enough position to sell off the business's prized assets and pocket a tidy profit at the same time. And on many occasions, he would buy and sell companies over a short time and often within a few months. By sweeping into action, Icahn would typically begin by purchasing small and seemingly insignificant amounts of company shares. However, unknown to the company's executive board, Icahn would slowly increase his purchase of company shares until he'd end up becoming the majority shareholder. As you can imagine, company executives were not exactly thrilled when a known corporate raider held major stakes in their business, especially when the shares were bought under the radar. As a major shareholder, Icahn's unorthodox tactics that led him to corporate raider domination were about to go into overdrive. At shareholders' meetings, he would often storm in, guns blazing. He openly criticized company executives, accusing them of financial mismanagement and general incompetence. During boardroom meetings, he'd often fly into temper tantrums. Icahn's rages continued over and over, and tales of his theatrics echoed across Wall Street. As Icahn manipulated both shareholders and company executives alike, he engaged in proxy battles to gain an executive seat, seizing the opportunity once more to wield as much power as he could. And as luck would have it, at least for Icahn, he usually got away with it. Once appointed to the executive board, which, as you may have guessed, Icahn had schemed to gain from the beginning, the other executives were powerless to his mood swings and overall theatrics. Icahn's most egregious takeover took place in 1985 when he acquired a 20% stake in Transworld Atlantic, also known as TWA. Founded in 1930, TWA expanded its flight path to Europe, and under the guidance of Howard Hughes, who took ownership in 1939, TWA went on to become part of America's Big Four airlines. It offered domestic flights cross-country as well as transatlantic flights to Europe. Howard Hughes further expanded the flight paths to the Middle East and Asia Pacific before ownership passed hands once more in 1960. To give you a broad perspective of how big TWA was, by the mid-1970s it was second only to Pan Am in the flights that it offered, connecting America to all corners of the world. The success of what was once a lucrative airline appeared to be on the rise when in 1978 the US federal state government announced that airlines could operate independently of government oversight for the first time. This meant that airlines were now at liberty to set their prices and plan their own flight paths. This announcement also opened the floodgates for new airlines, and thus competition within the domestic flight marketplace grew, which sounds great, so what could possibly go wrong? By 1985, TWA had financial problems which began to spiral. As a result, and under mounting pressure from shareholders, the executive board needed a white knight. A white knight is an investor who provides financial assurance. In essence, a white knight rescues failing businesses from financial ruin. For the TWA executives, they had two white knights in play. The first white knight was Frank Lorenzo, a highly experienced and seasoned businessman who owned Continental Airlines. The second white knight, however, was Carl Icahn. On the surface, Icahn looked to have the weaker hand. He had zero experience running an airline, and his reputation as a corporate raider was well publicized on the street. Nevertheless, TWA ruled out Frank Lorenzo because of Frank's hatred of trade unions. If Lorenzo was appointed the new owner of TWA, he would take a sledgehammer to its unionized workforce. By rejecting Lorenzo's bid, Icahn was appointed to the executive board. As soon as he was appointed, Icahn went to work. He reassured the executive board that he was there to help, and maybe he meant it at the time, but soon enough, Icahn's true motives were about to be revealed. Following a bitter 2 years of infighting, worker strikes and unhappiness from within, in 1988, with company morale at an all-time low, Icahn went on to privatize TWA, netting himself a tidy profit as the company fell further into debt. In TWA's history, its privatization spelled the beginning of the end, and worse still, in 1991, Icahn raided through the assets of TWA once more. This time, he sold off the New York to London route to American Airlines. It's worth noting that TWA's transatlantic route was one of its biggest money generators, and now that was gone. While this corporate raid proved to be highly lucrative for Icahn, unfortunately, the same cannot be said for the employees whose future remained uncertain. In contrast, between 1986 to 1991, Icahn pocketed a staggering $914 million from TWA's assets. In the end, after a series of bankruptcies and Icahn's departure in 1992, TWA's executive board finally accepted defeat and merged with its nemesis, American Airlines, in 2001. Fast forward to 2014, Icahn purchased 38.8 million shares in car rental giant Hertz. By the following quarter of 2014, that same year, Icahn bought a further 16.5 million shares, making him the largest shareholder with a 12% stake. Icahn believed that under his guidance, he could increase the company's value by restructuring its operation and accounting functions. However, in February 2020, a global black swan event occurred and all bets were off the table. By March 2020, 6 years after Icahn's investment, shares in Hertz plummeted. And now, with customers in global lockdown, Hertz's revenues went into freefall. With no end in sight, Hertz filed for bankruptcy, and shortly after, Icahn sold his shares, which meant he had to eat a $2 billion loss. As of 2020, Icahn has a net worth in the region of $15 to $22 billion. And while it may seem that I have painted an unflattering picture of him, it is worth noting that Icahn is a complicated man. In 2010, Icahn promised to donate half of his wealth to the Giving Pledge. The Giving Pledge Foundation is a charity founded by Bill Gates and Warren Buffett that encourages the wealthy to donate a large portion of their net worth to philanthropy. It's worth noting that the Giving Pledge is not Icahn's first charitable endeavour. In recent years, he has raised over $100 million for healthcare and education. It would be easy to make a hit piece on Icahn, as he has by no means been a saint. But like all of us, we are multifaceted characters, meaning where we have a good, kind and charitable side, everyone has a dark side. And while some people, like your friends and family, choose to exercise that dark side in their personal relationships and interactions, others reveal their dark side in the world of business. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more videos like this, click the subscribe button to support my channel. Until the next time, thanks for watching.